Welcome to CTV News Trendline with Michael Stittle and Nik Nanos.
Nick, we've seen an erosion of federal support lately, and you've got the latest ballot tracking numbers. What have you learned?
Well, the trend line is negative against the Liberals. They are in big trouble. Conservatives, check this out, the trend line. Conservatives, 38% support, up 6 points in the last 4 weeks. Liberals, 27, down 5. NDP, 21, Bloc 6, Green 6. That's a good number for the Greens. People's Party, 2%. So the Conservatives now with a significant 11-point lead over the Liberals. In the Nanos tracking, what we saw were ahead of the Conservative convention. The Conservatives were ahead. It narrowed a bit. Coming out of the Conservative convention, what we're seeing is a bump for the Conservatives, and all that stuff that's been happening in the House of Commons has not been good for the Liberals. Now they're 11 points back, and the Pierre Poilievre Conservatives are firmly in the driver's seat.
Now, they had this tremendous opportunity lately with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky's visit, and it just sort of ended in what the Prime Minister himself called an embarrassment for Canada and Parliament. What do you think they can ever take advantage of any of these opportunities, and is there long-lasting damage? What's the fallout for this?
Well, they haven't had a break. They haven't been able to take advantage of any opportunities lately. It's kind of, even with Biden's visit, which is usually good news for whoever happens to be the prime minister. When a U.S. president visits, it's usually good. You know, budgets are usually good news. Didn't get a bump out of that. Didn't get a bump out of the Zelensky visit. You know, they came hard on the Indian government on allegations related to the murder of a Canadian citizen in British Columbia. You know, so tough. What do we say? Tough type prime ministerial action. Nothing, because that was erased by controversy in the House of Commons related to the recognition of an individual that was associated with a Waffen SS unit, a Ukrainian veteran. So, you know, and, you know, a lot of these things are self-inflicted, right? Like it's not a result of the brilliance of the Conservatives. You know, the Conservatives basically are not making mistakes, and they're very controlled and disciplined, and they're just watching what is turning out to be a car crash for the Liberals and Justin Trudeau politically. And now, right now, the Conservatives have an 11-point advantage, you know, majority territory for the Conservatives right now.
In terms of the Parliament debacle, just to spell it out, it was the House Speaker invited a Ukrainian veteran who had fought for a Nazi unit, and the House mistakenly stood up and recognized that individual. The Liberals said that was squarely on the independence of the Speaker, that they really had nothing to do with mistakenly, inviting this guest. Do you find Canadians will draw a line between that, or will they associate this with a Liberal Party mistake?
Well, they're going to associate it as a Liberal Party mistake. And why don't we just be clear? You know, the Liberals tried to throw the Liberal Speaker under the bus in order to avoid this. But, you know, the thing is we have to recognize that I'm assuming that the Speaker did not purposefully do this, that this is a genuine error, because no one would want to do anything like this. But here's the way it works, Michael. As soon as the Prime Minister starts talking about this, the Prime Minister owns it. You know, we saw this before with Paul Martin and the Gomery inquiry and the advertising scandal. You know what? He was not involved in that. He was not part of that. He happened to be Prime Minister, and he called the inquiry. The more he talked about the inquiry, the more it stuck to the Liberal brand. And I think that's what we're seeing here. You know, the more Justin Trudeau has to talk or explain anything related to the Speaker's decision and the person that he invited to recognize who should not have been recognized, this basically attaches itself to the Liberal brand, whether it's the Liberal Speaker or the Prime Minister when the Prime Minister is talking about this.
We also have this issue with India, where diplomatic tensions are at an all-time low. You might even say now there are reports that India may want Canada to recall some of its diplomats in that country. On the world stage, the Liberals can't seem to step right.
Well, think of it this way. You know, we have strained relations with China. We now have very strained relations with India. It wasn't cordial before, because you remember that one trip where the Prime Minister and his family went on. That was, I don't even know what words to use to describe it. Not good. Why don't we just say that? And not successful. to India. And now the Indian government. So these are two major economies that are not on good terms with Canada. Why don't we just throw in, what happens if Donald Trump becomes president of the United States and wins the next election? We'll have like trouble with the three largest countries, biggest economies in the world, and we're a trading nation. So, foreign policy has just not gone well. And, even for the Europeans, we naturally have a lot of affinity with the Europeans, but, we're getting the gears because, we're not keeping up with our NATO commitments. And now the Liberals have just announced that they're cutting $1 billion in defense spending. So how about this? Who are our friends, Michael? Are we hearing crickets? Are we hearing crickets? It's just not a great time. On the foreign policy front, it's like all the chickens are coming home to roost, and foreign policy is just it's a difficult area to navigate. So you can imagine being a diplomat, a Canadian diplomat. This is just a difficult time to navigate between complications with Canada's relationship with China, complications with Canada's relationship with India. The United States being more focused on a domestic agenda, and we having the free trade agreement coming up to negotiate. And then we've also got our NATO allies who want us to step up and invest and be at the table, and we're not giving them the commitments that we want. So just think how difficult it must be if you're a diplomat right now. It's just tough times.
Now, Nick, for better or worse, the federal Liberal Party is really tied to Justin Trudeau as a brand. What are your latest preferred PM numbers saying?
Well, the preferred PM tracking for Justin Trudeau is not good either, kind of like the ballot numbers. Right now, Pierre Poilievre, the choice of 32% of Canadians, he's up a full 5 percentage points on the preferred prime minister tracking that we do. Justin Trudeau, back at 23%. He's down 5 points in the last 4 weeks. Jagmeet Singh is around 16. He's basically where he has been before. But, even on the preferred prime minister tracking, Pierre Poilievre has a 9-point advantage. Usually whoever the prime minister is has a baked-in advantage. Not so now. And not only is it a small advantage, this is a significant 9-point advantage. This shows that, think of it this way, the Liberals are at 27, Justin Trudeau is at 23 on the preferred prime minister front. There's no political coattails for Justin Trudeau right now. The big thing is that if the Liberals want to be competitive in the next election with Justin Trudeau as their leader, there needs to be a significant turnaround on these numbers and a remake in terms of vision, approach, and renewal, like some energy. And they need a break because they haven't had a break because everything's gone wrong for them that could go wrong. Perhaps something will go right for them, but right now, on the leadership front, on the ballot numbers, the Liberal numbers are dismal, and the Conservatives have a clear upper hand.
So, Nick, the Pierre Poilievre and his Conservative Party are definitely ahead, but that doesn't necessarily always translate to electoral success. Popular support and how you actually do in our first past the post system are quite two different things. You actually have your monthly house projection numbers out.
Yep.
I'm wondering if we can kind of go coast to coast and see what we can find out.
Sure, absolutely. On the big picture front, with the Conservatives at 38 and the Liberals at 27 and the NDP at 21, our house projection that we do every month suggests that the Conservatives will form a majority government if an election were held today. So the good news for the Conservatives is that if the election were held today, they would probably form a majority government. The bad news for the Conservatives, or maybe the good news for the Liberals, is that an election is not being held today. It'll be held sometime in the future. So for the Conservatives, they want to hold on to this advantage, and for the Liberals, they got to try to turn this trend line around. But yeah, let's walk through. Would you want to start east, Michael? Or are we going to start west?
Let's go west. Let's go west.
Okay.
Let's go west, young man. What's happening in BC?
Well, you can see on the left-hand side is our current model projection, and I'd like to focus on the Vancouver area. On the right is the last election, and you can see a significant difference for the Liberals. Significant setbacks. If a riding is black, it means it's too close to call within a 2% margin. If it's gray, it's too close to call within a 0 to 7% margin between the two front runners. And, check out, basically you have Liberal setbacks across Vancouver, with them only holding in our current seat projections 3 ridings. I think it's Vancouver South, Surrey Centre, and Surrey Newton. I think those are the three that they hold on to. But for the Conservatives, look, a pickup in Richmond Centre, also West Vancouver, Sunshine Coast, pickup for the Conservatives. But looks like Vancouver is now a major battleground. The NDP still holding on to some seats and competitive in those seats. So I think the two parties to watch now in Vancouver will actually be the Conservatives and the New Democrats, with a number of Liberal seats at risk right in the Lower Mainland.
Let's take a look at the prairies.
Yeah, if you notice, Michael, I don't have a comparative chart for well, I do have a comparative map for the prairies, but it's pretty similar. It looks pretty blue. It remains blue. But the thing is, there's a situation where, that those handful of ridings that the Liberals do have in the prairies, for example, Edmonton Centre is now in play and could be at risk, as is the riding in Calgary. So if an election were held now, there's a likelihood that the Liberals would have no, as in 0 seats in the West. They weren't doing well in the West before, but no. And for those seats, interestingly, in one of those seats, the NDP are competitive with the Liberals. In the other seat, the Conservatives are competitive with the Liberals. So the Liberals have to deal with both of those other parties and those the seats that are right now at risk for them in the prairies.
And in Ontario, especially around the Greater Toronto area, how are things looking?
Man, when you look at the last election, it's pretty red in Toronto. Toronto is usually one of those bedrock Liberal, why don't we call it ground zero for the Liberals, right? When the Liberals are strong in Toronto, that means that they can fight nationally and look to try to win an election. When they're weak in Toronto, you can see that it's just bad news. Some interesting races to watch. Parkdale Hyde Park for the NDP could be a pickup, as is Davenport. For the Conservatives, Cambridge is a riding that goes on the west. That's on the west end of the GTA. It's a riding that goes back and forth. We have Cambridge projected for the Conservatives, and a lot of those ridings in the western part of the GTA, in the Bramptons, Mississaugas, basically in play and up for grab. And the Conservatives could even pick up Vaughan Woodbridge, which would be a big gain for them. But the key takeaway is that sea of red that we saw and usually see in elections is up for grabs. There are going to be a number of Liberal members that are going to be fighting for their lives. They haven't lost yet, but if you can see, if the riding's either black or gray, that means that Liberal riding is in play with a challenge either from the NDP or the Conservatives.
Nick, what about Quebec?
Well, Quebec is interesting. What I'd like to focus on in Quebec is the fact that there's not really a lot of change. This is the one riding that is good for the Liberals, and that one province that is good, where the Liberals are not on the defensive. The Conservatives have not been able to make a big breakthrough. They're probably going to hold on to what they have. The big, I think one wild card or interesting dimension for Quebec will be, how will Pierre Poilievre's wife play in Quebec? She's perfectly bilingual. She's got a very interesting personal story, being a new Canadian and living in Quebec, and she's probably going to be a big asset for the Conservatives that they will try to use to make a breakthrough in Quebec. But the Quebec voters are a little different than everyone else. They won't go in a particular direction, and then something will happen. It's happened with Jack Layton, right? There's a Jack Layton effect where like 1 week he was not a player, and then the next week the numbers started to move. So Quebec will be interesting to watch on that front.
And we've seen Jagmeet Singh's NDP party kind of struggle during his term as leader at gaining popular support in Quebec, unlike his late predecessor, Jack Layton.
Yeah, or Tom Mulcair. Tom Mulcair was very effective at appealing to voters in Quebec. Tom Mulcair being a provincial Quebec cabinet minister and a very popular personal brand in the province. Jagmeet Singh hasn't been able to do that. But you know what? The bread and butter for Jagmeet Singh has to be Toronto, right? He's a Toronto guy. He's a New Democrat. The New Democrats, do have a base in Toronto. They do have organization in Toronto. I think for Jagmeet Singh, his political future will probably be predicated on his ability to deliver some more seats in Toronto.
Mm.
And I don't think that's an unrealistic expectation. I think when New Democrats picked him as leader, I think they thought that he could make a breakthrough in Ontario or pick up more seats at the very least, but we haven't really seen that manifest itself.
Mm. Nick, I always find Atlantic Canada gets interesting, and for me anyways, it always seems like a kind of an indicator of where the country might go. Where is Atlantic Canada now?
Well, right now, you can see traditionally on the right-hand side that the Liberals actually do quite well in Atlantic Canada. It usually makes them feel good. On election night, they're usually happy when the Atlantic Canadian, the maritime numbers come in.
Mm.
But when you look at where we're at now, we only have right now in the Maritimes, at least, 2 Liberal holds.
Mm.
Beausejour, that's Dominic LeBlanc, and Halifax, I think that's Fillmore, who's the member of parliament there. So, yikes. What this shows is the Conservatives are poised to pick up seats in the Maritimes, and that the Liberal members, although some of them might hold on, are basically in very tight races. They're in races for their lives to try to hold on to seats in the Maritimes. And I think the big question is how many seats will the Liberals lose in the Maritimes? They'll probably win more than the 2 that we currently have in the win column, because they are competitive in other ridings. But the question is how bad will it be in the Maritimes for the Liberal Party of Canada?
Nick, what's your big takeaway from all this?
Liberals in trouble, and Justin Trudeau's brand is weakening, and that's a 1-2 punch that sets up the Conservatives to have a chance to form a majority government. But who knows what will happen when the election actually occurs?
We're going to take a little break, but when we come back, 2 historical firsts in Canada. So, Nick, we've had 2 big historical firsts in Canada. The election of Canada's first Black man as Speaker of the House, and also the first ever First Nations premier of a province, with Wapkanu winning victory in Manitoba. Let's start with the House Speaker. What does that mean for Canada?
Well, you know what? Oh, Greg Fergus. So good on Greg Fergus for winning. The reality is that he won because of the person that he is, not because of his identity.
Mm-hmm.
Anyone that has observed Greg Fergus's career knows that he's very even-handed. He's friendly with his colleagues across all party lines. He is a parliamentary procedural geek. Oh man, which makes him it makes him the perfect individual to be the Speaker of the House. So he won in his own right by secret ballot, and it just speaks to his quality as a candidate. That said, he's now also will be a role model for Canadians, and a new and renewed face in the House of Commons. But being Speaker is tough. Let's face it, it's not easy, because even though he was elected a Liberal, he is now independent as the Speaker of the House of Commons, is there over to preside over things. And the number one complaint that parliamentarians and everybody has is the lack of decorum in the House. So it's going to be interesting to see how Greg Fergus, the tone at the top, why don't we call it the parliamentary tone, the tone at the parliamentary top, how that filters down to how the House of Commons and members of Parliament conduct themselves. So good news for Greg Fergus upon being elected, and in addition to that, obviously he's a role model for many Canadians.
And Nick, Wapkanu's NDP party has won a majority government in Manitoba after years of progressive conservative rule. Is that a big surprise? Did we see that coming, and what does that mean for Canada?
Well, all the polling suggested that it was a two-way race between the Conservatives and the New Democrats, and the polling consensus in the close of the campaign was that the New Democrats had the advantage. The NDP have been traditionally strong in Manitoba. Wapkanu ran a great campaign, and you know what? He won and was rewarded with a majority government. So I think Manitobans. I don't think when Manitobans were voting, they were thinking about his identity. They were just thinking about what he could do for the province and the quality that he brought to the table as an individual. That said, he is now. I think he's going to be one of the ranking individuals. Like he's a First Nations person, but within kind of the Indigenous movement within Canada. And he's also going to be, and I think this is the interesting part, very interesting part, in addition to being the Premier of Manitoba, he's going to be sitting at the table at the Council of the Federation, and I think this is going to be a unique opportunity to have discussions about the relations between Indigenous peoples in Canada, and I think I think people are going to want to hear. I think Indigenous individuals and Canadians are going to want to hear where he lands on a lot of these things, on reconciliation and the relationship between Indigenous peoples and Canada. So yeah, good news. We have to think we have him. We also have Mary Simon as we can't forget, as our Governor General. So you roll up some of these things, and what we're seeing is just a greater level of diversity in our leadership. But we have to remember that all these individuals, they're there because of merit. Like, you know what I mean? So. They happen to have a particular identity, and now they'll be role models, not just as the leaders that they are within our democracy, but also for a number of other Canadians.
Nick, I think we'll leave it there. Thanks as always.
Okay.